So this question comes from Ronnie I, and frankly, it's one of those interesting questions that you should be thinking about if you're going to be going into the technology business, because it's a vital thing, and if you haven't thought about it beforehand, it can be very detrimental. So I love your videos. You've helped me with my career so much. I owe you a lot. I met up with a startup that had pretty decent seed funding, and they want to bring me in to develop a training program. I've been self-employed for most of my life, but I've always sort of wanted to work at a startup. I've heard about getting vested equity and stuff like that. I was wondering if you have any advice on how and what to negotiate. The average salary for that position is roughly $97,000 a year, but I don't think I would be happy with that. Anyway, any advice would be much appreciated. Thank you so much. So here is the big question. This is the question that you're going to have to be thinking about, when you sit down at the table for anybody that is going to be hiring you. Whether it is a client that will be hiring you, whether it is a boss, employer that's going to be hiring you. And if you haven't thought about this beforehand, it can be a real pain in the ass. I know, especially when I've tried to hire people, the question that I always ask is, how much money do you need? And then they'll be like, well, how much money are you offering? And then I'll be like, zero, because you're an idiot. And that's about where the conversation stops. Because what you have to understand, being somebody that's going to be hiring people, is one of the biggest problems that employers of any kind run into, is that people say they're willing to work for a certain amount of money or a certain amount of equity. You then hire them, you basically sign a contract on that, and then somehow they start thinking they're worth more than that, and you start having all kinds of effing problems. I had this again and again and again with employees, where you tell them what the salary is. Again, it's like, listen, this is what the job is, this is what the salary is this acceptable to you? Yes, it's acceptable. You hire them, and then a month later they're talking about how much they're really worth. And since they're really worth so much more, they're only going to give you the amount of work you're paying for. And then you sit there and you really just wish you could hit employees, but you're not allowed to. So what you really have to think about, the big question you have to think about whenever you're going to go into these negotiations, is how much do you actually need? How much do you believe in this company? Now, so normally, if you're thinking about normal companies, one of the question you have to ask yourself is, how much do I really need? What do I need to pay the mortgage? What do I need to pay the bills? What do I need? What financially will make me happy? Do I believe this company will exist for a decent amount of time? And do I believe that I can get promoted? Right. So I mean that weighs things out. If I may be willing to take $10,000 less now if I can see that the company is growing very quickly, and so I know I'll be able to move up to a higher level position within the next year. And so within a year, I may get a $15,000 raise because I can move up positions. This company is growing. I can see that it's growing. Therefore, I want to be part of it. Right. That's something to be thinking about. So if you're going to go into a startup company, this is the type of thing that you have to think is, do you care about the startup? The one thing that gets hammered again and again and again with startup companies, and it really is true, is, are you a true believer? Do you believe? And that's a question that you have to ask yourself. If you're going to go into a startup company, you have to realize there's a good chance it's going to fail. I don't care how much seed funding it has. There's a really good chance it's going to fail. One of the quotes, I watched this YouTube thing, podcast thing, called This Week in Startups. And one of the VCs that came on said that basically he figures that for every 60 startups he invests in, 2 will succeed. You know what I'm saying? The success rate for startup companies is absolutely and utterly miserable. So if you're going to be going into a startup company, one of the things that you have to go in there, one of the reasons that you should be going into it is because you really do want to change the world. You believe in this product so much that you are willing to lose money if it doesn't succeed. You go in there and you say, this is going to be revolutionary, and I believe in this so much much that I am willing to take a loss of pay or such in order to try to make it happen. And if it doesn't succeed, I will be sad that it didn't succeed, but I will be able to accept the loss. So if you're going to go in a startup company, the big thing is that you're a true believer. True believer. Then you have to think about, are they going to be paying you the amount that you need? I mean, the problem is a lot of people, again, it's everybody wants to hand over equity. Again, I've dealt with a lot of these startup founders, and a lot of them are as dumb as frickin' bricks because they keep trying to give away equity. They're like, I should be able to pay everybody with equity. I'll give you 2%, and I'll give you 5%, and I'll give you 0.5%, and you should be happy with your equity, right? Well, I don't know about any other adults out there, but I got a mortgage, and I can't pay my mortgage with fractions of equity. I don't care. I don't care what the potential of the startup is. I don't care how revolutionary a startup is. I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got health insurance to pay. I've got corgi bills to pay for. I have bills. So that's one of the things you have to ask yourself is how much money do you really need? If you need 60 grand a year, you need 60 grand a year. You can't accept 50. If you need 60 grand a year and you accept 50, that means you have to chop $10,000 out of your budget some way, somehow. Again, don't be an idiot. I've seen this again so many times. And this is why I can't deal with employees anymore, and I can't deal with a lot of these numbnuts anymore, is because they know they need an amount of money. I need $60,000 a year. I don't know this when I'm presenting the offer and I say, listen, I'm offering $50,000. And they go, we got a deal. Well, then I hire them, and they can't pay their damn bills off of what I offered. And then it's like, well, why the hell did you accept it? Well, I thought I would get promoted quicker than this. I thought we'd be doing better than this. I thought I'd get a bonus. Why did you think you're going to get a bonus? I never said a damn thing about bonus. Where the fuck did bonus come from? You know what I'm saying? So that's what you got. You got to look at it, and whatever amount of money you take, you have to accept that is the amount of money that you're getting, and that's what you're contracted into. That's what you've accepted, and that's what you're willing to pay, or that's what you're willing to be paid. Past that, you then go into equity. You start looking at equity, and equity. I don't believe a lot in equity, to be honest with you. I'd rather take cash than equity most of the time, because again, most of these businesses are going to fail. Not only are they going to, not only is it that most startups fail, a huge, massive portion of startups fail, but oh my golly, once you actually start dealing with these startup people and you start dealing with financing and equity and all that kind of stuff, it is amazing how easy it is to get screwed over equity. So whenever they're going for their funding, so you've got your seed round, that's just your normal round, then your A round and all those different rounds, and your investor round and all that kind of stuff. Basically, whenever the new people are willing to give the company money, they have requirements. And some of the requirements, will just screw over every lower level investor. So there's this idea that, okay, I got this stock, or I got this percentage of the company, back when the company started, I'm going to be a bazillionaire. But it's amazing how through all of these tactics, what you think is a decent proportion of the company turns in to be worth almost nothing. I've heard quite a number of startup founders talk about this, where they go in, they start getting funding, they're getting all this money, their business explodes, they go to sell out, and they get almost nothing. The investors walk away with a really tidy sum, and the founders walk away with almost nothing because how everything was stipulated. So be very careful with equity. Equity is one of those, think of equity kind of as the lottery, is what I would say. So basically, are you a true believer in the startup? Do you believe in the mission of the startup? If you do, go for it. If you don't, walk the hell away. Know how much money you need. If you need $97,000 a year, you need $97,000 a year. If you need $200,000 a year, you need $200,000 a year. I am not telling you how much money you need, but you need to figure that out. And if they don't give you that amount of money, you need to walk away. And then finally, as I say, for the equity, equity's equity. Consider it lottery. lottery tickets. If it pays out, awesome. But again, if it doesn't pay out, make sure you haven't lost everything. One of the big problems, especially with older people, is you run into what are called opportunity costs. So, right, young people, right, until you hit age 30, it doesn't really matter what the hell you do in life. You can go to college, you can travel around the world, you can start a startup company. It doesn't really matter. Basically, at year 30, you can start your life and you can have a nice, successful career. You can take all those weird experiences you had in your 20s, turn them into some kind of, mash them into some kind of resume, take that resume, be able to get a decent job, and then go from there. What you have to be careful about is, as you get older, I know because I'm almost 39 now, is that you start running into professional opportunity costs. So if I go and I do that, I work for the startup organization, it means I'm not getting experience doing something else. So what I have to ask myself is, if this startup completely and utterly fails, am I walking away from it with something that is good for my resume? Or basically, is that just a 4-year black hole that isn't really good for anything? I talked with one startup person about this, and it was really sad. It was really sad because I was talking to him, and we were going back and forth about their thing. And I explained to him why basically it was a failure. I was like, listen, you've been working on it this many years. You've put this much money into it. It was like all of this stuff, right? All this time we got put into it, all this money got put into it, all these resources got put into it, and literally they needed a whiteboard, like whiteboard, like more or less, take the brand, take the logo, and start from square one. And I was like, I have to tell you, I'm really worried about your opportunity costs here, because it seems like you've already passed up quite a few opportunities. And to basically, after 4 years, have to whiteboard this thing, you've really got to ask yourself, is it worth it? Being in his late 30s that he was. And it was one of the saddest things when he looked at me and he said, "You want to know opportunity costs?" And he explained to me why in the past, because of the work that he had been doing at this company, he had to pass up other far more lucrative, far better, just across the board better opportunities, and he was sitting there at zero. So that's the thing. It's like he's doing this startup company. We're going to take over the world. So he passes up opportunities because he's going to take over the world. 4 years later, his startup is basically worthless, and he's thinking about having to essentially start from square one, and those opportunities that he had are no longer there. So that's some stuff to be thinking about. Just go in. And the biggest thing is to yourself and to them, be honest. The biggest problem that I've seen, especially being an employer and having to deal with people, is people lie to themselves. They just lie to them. They go in with this idea, I want to work for a startup company, and they get motivated about that, but then they're not thinking about their mortgage. Your mortgage costs a certain amount of money. Whether you work for the startup company or whether you work for something, do something else, that mortgage is the mortgage. Get what I'm saying? So those would be my very long-winded thoughts on that.